And coming right out of the crash, when you start blaming DEI, what you're saying to your base is, oh, I'm not going to look into what went wrong here. Was it the plane? Was it the helicopter? Why was it the miscommunication, overstaffing, understaffing? Overstaffing is not an issue, but understaffing, etc. Right? You're coming out and going, minorities did it.
In this video, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks joins the panel on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Cenk Uygur suggests that it's outrageous for Trump to blame DEI for the tragedy, and journalist Natalie Winters easily dismantles his poorly thought out argument. With that, let's watch Cenk Uygur babble nonsensically per usual, and shortly thereafter, get easily shut down.
I want to play a clip of President Trump talking about the appalling plane crash in Washington.
Point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them. They can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so.
I've got to be honest, Cenk, before you respond to that, I did not like that. I didn't like that. I just felt like there's a time and a place to do that kind of stuff, and it's not in the immediate aftermath of a terrible crash with so many people killed, and before you really know anything about what's happened. Now, it may well turn out, as often with Trump, that a lot of the stuff he's talking about in some way that there will be merit to the argument. But I just felt the timing, to me, was wrong. That if you're president of the United States and 60-odd people plus the people on board the helicopter, if they've all died in a horrific crash, actually your job in that moment is to be comforter-in-chief, not blamer-in-chief.
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you. First off, yes, I know the program that he's referring to, and it doesn't help our side to deny reality. So there was a terrible DEI or diversity program about a decade ago, and it did absurd things like give you extra points if science was your worst class, right? So it was absurd. But that's been gone for over a decade now. And coming right out of the crash, when you start blaming DEI, what you're saying to your base is, oh, I'm not going to look into what went wrong here. Was it the plane? Was it the helicopter? Why was it the miscommunication? Overstaffing, understaffing. Overstaffing is not an issue, but understaffing, etc. Right? You're coming out and going, minorities did it, and that's a terrible look. And you could say, hey, you know what, Cenk, you just told us that there were some DEI abuses. That's right, and that's part of why they won the election. But if you then swing the pendulum so far that you blame minorities after every single incident, which is basically what looks like it's happening right now, you're going to turn off the country. You certainly turned me off. So and then they'd realize, oh wait, black voters are coming towards us, so that's a bad idea. So Jesse Waters goes on Fox News and goes, well, okay, it wasn't black people, it was dwarves, the deaf, and transgender people. You didn't even investigate anything yet, and you're blaming dwarves? It's absurd, and it's going to have the pendulum swing back against you, and the American people are going to go, I'm tired of you blaming minorities and women and dwarves for everything. This is absurd.
I have yet to see any evidence that DEI played a direct role in this crash, so I won't claim that, but just because there was a terrible policy in place 10 years ago doesn't mean that its effects aren't felt today. For example, isn't it pretty likely that there are folks that were hired through those programs that still work there today? And second, to act like DEI is done now because that program is 10 years old doesn't mean that the idea of DEI isn't still very prevalent in our society. Since the recent election, it's been put under a microscope, and more people are realizing what conservatives have known for a long time, that it's a big joke. But I still don't know an industry out there that doesn't go out of their way to have a specific number of each race or percentage of their workforce. Of companies, industries are terrified to be singled out as the one group that didn't hire the right number of minority applicants. So while I can't at all say that Donald Trump is 100% correct. To act like DEI isn't still very much alive and kicking is ridiculous. And Cenk's doing his whole thing again with throwing out words that are inflammatory for some people. No one said anything about minorities in this, but of course, he has to frame it as Donald Trump is blaming minorities. Honestly, anyone with a logical thinking brain knows that's absolutely not what Donald Trump is doing. He's blaming not basing your hiring decisions on merit. That's it. And I didn't see the Jesse Waters segment he's talking about. I don't know what he's talking about with dwarves and stuff, but it sounds to me like a really pathetic attempt by Cenk to attack Trump for something, anything. Because frankly, I think I echo the sentiment of a lot of Americans that Donald Trump's doing a pretty darn good job. And I'm happy to concede that maybe coming right out of the gate and saying DEI is the problem wasn't the best move, just because it gives people like Cenk the opportunity to attack him, and people may get the impression that he doesn't care about the victims or anything like that. But telling the truth is always going to offend people at times. And Cenk also subtly threw in there that if you come right out with DEI, that gives people the impression that you're not going to investigate the crash at all. What are you talking about? You know the crash is going to be investigated thoroughly. But let's watch the rest of the video.
Please.
I would also point out President Trump said these comments while giving a press briefing in the James Brady press briefing room. It wasn't like he was saying it in a capacity where he couldn't be challenged.
No, but let me ask you, Natalie. No, Natalie, Natalie, let me ask you this. Yeah, but Natalie, let me ask you this. I felt for the first half of it, he was absolutely on point and he said all the right things. But if you were, for example, if you knew somebody on the plane or the helicopter, a family member, a friend, a work colleague, whoever it may be, how would you honestly have felt? Just be honest about what he then went into the line he then took, where he was just having a go at Biden, having a go at Obama, having a go about DEI, all these things. I mean, I don't know about you, but I just felt on a human level, my criticism would have been wrong timing. Just don't do it there. Not the first time the president talks about it.
I think I would have been infinitely more upset and more critical of the FAA and hiring policies and procedures that allowed for that crash to happen.
Yeah, but you don't actually. But that's the point.
You
Natalie,
don't know that.
No, but hang on, Natalie. You don't. Yeah, here's the point, Natalie. You have no idea why that crash happened. None of us do. So when you say that, you're justifying what President Trump did, but you don't know any more than he did in that moment about what's happened here. We just have no idea. It could have been anything.
He did not directly outright blame it on DEI in the same way that we talked about COVID origin.
Go back and read the transcript. Go back.
Yeah, he did.
Go back and read the transcript.
Factors. Decades of hiring unqualified people or less qualified people is going to lead to less qualified people running, as they
but
call them.
But if I've been him, honestly, Cenk, if I've been President Trump, if I had already found out, and I don't know if he knew this in the moment or not, if I had found out that, for example, in that air traffic control room, normally at that time of night, there is somebody managing the helicopters and somebody managing the planes. And in that particular moment on that night, one person was doing both jobs. That fact alone, and I'll come to Richard for your more expert view of that, but that fact alone raises massive alarm bells, and it plays to the general agreed feeling about this from all sides that air traffic control is under real pressure in terms of staffing. So, and that, it seems to me, might well turn out to be the most likely thing here, rather than DEI, which is a separate issue. I mean, I honestly, I hate DEI. I think it's become an awful thing that has been misused, mischaracterized, and
so as Piers was asking his question about if I were a family member of someone and Trump mentioned DEI, would I be offended or something like that? Honestly, I'd be mourning my loved one, but I'm just speaking for myself. I don't think that I would be. And what Natalie Winters said just kind of goes to my earlier point. Yeah, it's like I said, the remnants of these programs are still being felt. If you've been hiring a certain way for decades, it doesn't just go away overnight and everything's okay. It takes time to get things back on track. And my question is, why are air traffic controllers having issues with staffing? Is it because they were only looking for a select person or group of people to work for them? I don't know, but based on what we know about air traffic controllers' history of hiring practices, I think that's a reasonable question to ask. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Actually abused in a way which has promoted mediocrity over meritocracy, and I hate that. So just for the record, DEI sucks, just generally as a concept, I think. However, there's no evidence DEI played any part here, but there is clear evidence now emerging of understaffing and potentially critical understaffing, where one person was doing 2 jobs on a busy night.
And that's exactly what happened.
So,
in a sense.
okay,
Okay, sorry.
Right, Richard, I'll come to you in one sec. Just get Cenk to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, as we speculate as to what is more likely, I have dwarves as less likely. I have understaffing as far, far, far more likely. And so what happened here is that Congress, by the way, and almost no one's talking about this, and I'll tell you why in a second, ordered 50 more routes at an already incredibly crowded airway at Reagan National Airport. And that's because they wanted direct flights back to their states and districts, and let's be honest, probably their donors. So did they then increase the air traffic controllers at Reagan? No, they refused to fund that. But they said, you have to give us our direct flights. So that's the first place I would look for as to what went wrong, because we definitely had understaffing. And if I'm a family member of someone who died and someone's doing nonsense talk about dwarves and transgender people, instead of trying to figure out why my family member died and to make sure that we prevent that from happening again, I would be furious. But why don't people talk about that? Well, because Republican and Democratic politicians voted that way. So it's not easy to say it's Trump's fault, it's DEI's fault, so it doesn't fall into the normal political and cultural wars. And one last thing on this, Piers. Look, Trump's greatest strength and weakness is the same thing, marketing. So when we were talking about earlier, he comes in, it's the same economy, he pretends that it changed overnight and went from terrible to amazing, but he beats his chest and marketing, and it works. And the Democrats never, ever defend themselves, can't make their case if their life depended. But on the other hand, Trump always takes it too far. And so here he comes in and goes, oh, all these people died. It's a great advantage to use my talking points against DEI. No, it isn't, brother. And it's really sad for those families and disturbing that you're using them for a political tactic, and it's
it
really
would actually be
terrible.
It would be genuinely hilarious if it turned out you were Donald Trump's brother, just for the record. Let me bring Richard in.
Cenk should have just stuck with his Trump shouldn't have talked about DEI thing and left it at that. Instead, he's acting as if Trump doesn't care about the victims or their families. That's typical Cenk. That's where he took it too far. Just because he brought up a real problem, and I acknowledge that Trump could be wrong about DEI playing a role, it doesn't mean that Trump's some callous jerk. And Cenk, by the way, he doesn't need to score political points, as you put it, with DEI. The right has won on that issue, and people are just sick of it. So stop trying to paint this as some big L for Trump, Cenk. You're really reaching here. At worst, he's incorrect with his assessment, but I have no doubt that there's a thorough investigation going on right now, and the loved ones and the American people will know soon enough what or who is to blame. But we want to hear from you. What do you all think about this recent mid-air collision? Donald Trump suggesting that DEI played a factor in it? And what did you think about this conversation between Cenk Uygur and the panel? Let us know. Anyway, as always, really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.